Hello, amateurs, and welcome back to our Six Nations series. And I've got another very special guest with me today. He's been on this podcast several times before. He's had a glittering career, but now he's Lucas Friday's dad. Mike, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Oh, well, how the world has changed, eh? From watching him warm up as a 4 or 5-year-old at the end of Blackheath with you lot to now being known as Lucas Friday's dad. Yeah, I mean, that's what I call the perfect ending to a story. Yeah, it's great. It's great that the world is changing and is going full circle, and I'm super pleased and proud of him and everything he's doing. He's got his feet firmly on the ground. He's been brought up the right way, so he works hard, and hopefully he stays healthy and he can keep progressing. But yeah, it's interesting times for him.
Yeah, for sure. We are obviously here to talk about the senior England side, but the under-20 Six Nations going on at the same time, and Lucas is due to be playing. Is that right?
Yeah, he's in the mix. I mean, he's a very young man. I mean, he went to that World Cup, which they won as a 17-year-old. So he was still at school. So he was the youngest in the tournament. And he more than held his own, but people kind of forget he's still got 2 years at under 20s. So he's in the mix. He's doing well. I think it's fierce competition in his position. It's him and Archie McParland. Archie's causing some waves himself. You know, he's doing really well at Northampton. Archie's a year older than Lucas, but I know Lucas, he's ultra competitive. Archie's definitely ultra competitive. So it'll bring out the best in them, and hopefully they'll spur one another on. And then there are other boys in the background, right? Don Hanson and Johnny Wiseman as well. So it's exciting times for the under-20s in general. You know, they've got so much depth in so many positions, as we saw last year in the 20s World Cup, and it is a ridiculous conveyor belt that England are lucky to have.
Yeah, so listeners, get out there and watch some of that under-20 Six Nations as well if you can. It's some of my favourite rugby that I've ever watched is the under-20 stuff. So let's get into the big subject of the day, though, and that is seeing what this England team is all about right now heading into this Six Nations Championship. But what do you think for the last 12 months, Mike? Just give us a little sort of rundown of where England have come from the last Six Nations and through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not been ideal from the results perspective, right? Let's be perfectly blunt. And the autumn especially as well. I think, you know, the Six Nations last year is one thing, but then when we look at the autumn, that was, I think, a little bit disappointing. It was a stern test, you know, that New Zealand, South Africa, Australia and Japan. But they were games that they were capable of winning. And they didn't for a number of reasons, and that was disappointing because ultimately at international rugby you're judged by the win-loss column. But by the same token, when they're not far away, right? But is not far away good enough? Because at international rugby, not far away means you lose. And I think there were shoots of positivity. I think especially in the South Africa game. And to a certain extent in the Australia game as well, where again they managed to lose that from winning it. But ultimately, in the Six Nations this year, they need to start winning games, and that is going to be tough. It's a tough tournament, and I think Borthwick and his crew have got some decisions to make and some lessons to have learned from what went on in the autumn.
Yeah, for sure. Now, talking about Borthwick and his crew, that crew's changed a fair bit over the past 12 months. As a very experienced coach yourself, Mike, what kind of damage or how does that really affect a team and a squad as they try and build sort of continuity and togetherness?
Yeah, I mean, continuity is critical, right, to consistency. But you need consistency of message, consistency of philosophy. And if you haven't got that, you've got that disharmony, then that can pull teams apart as well. So, you know, Borthwick's the boss. He obviously has a set philosophy he wants, and you're either on that bus or you're not. And if you're not, then you get off. Whether or not that's right or wrong is for other people to decide. But, you know, Borthwick is very strategic in his thinking. He's very analytical, and he has a clear vision that he's working towards. Whether people agree or disagree with it is kind of a non-event, right? Because he's the bus driver. So I think, that maybe you could layer some of that in terms of the autumn internationals, in terms of bedding in his new protocols and dealing with the changes that he had to. But obviously, moving to the Six Nations now, I think people will want to see results, and they'll want to see the effect of the change in a positive way.
Absolutely. And now, obviously, talking about the Six Nations coming up, he's picked the squad. And I think the headline thing for everybody was the changing captaincy. What did you make of that, Mike?
It doesn't surprise me, if I'm honest with you. I think, and that's no kind of no reflection on Jamie George. I think Jamie George is an elder statesman in the squad, and he is under pressure from a lot of quality hookers. And I think if the most important thing as England captain is if you're fit and you're playing well, you should be certain of your position in the team. That's a big piece of that. And I think Itoje, with where he is in the heights of his powers, is that man. He's a very strategic thinker. It doesn't diminish what Jamie George can add value from his kind of 2IC perspective, maybe. I know he's injured and he's out of the squad at the moment, but nonetheless, they're all experienced, senior, professional rugby players that understand the job in hand. And I think Itoje has kind of got that demeanour. He's got that kind of forthrightness where he's going to go and knock on the opposition's door and say, let's get on with it. Very much in the mould of Jono, but not Jono, obviously. He's Itoje in his own right. But I sense that about him and where he is right now in how he goes about his business. He is very uncompromising on the pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. And super competitive as well in every moment of every game. Now, the squad as a whole, I mean, Borthwick talks a lot about consistency and getting combinations and time on the pitch together. And there's a lot of that in this squad. There's a lot of consistency in this squad with a sprinkling of other players as well. Some new boys in there too. What do you make of the squad as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. He does talk about consistency and combinations. And I think the reality is that's probably where they need to step up to the mark as a coaching team and as a squad. They've got to get the right combination. They've got to get the right combinations to bring the best out of the team. The team has to be more than the sum of the parts. So his point is picking the best 15 players. There has to be a sense of combinations and picking people in their positions, but also allowing the versatility to adapt the way that they want to play. And I think they've sometimes been ruled a little bit too much by analytics, and they've kind of constrained themselves on some of the times that they make their substitutions in times gone by, rather than following gut and feel. And rugby isn't all stats and data. There's a sense of feel and ebb and flow within games to be able to make those decisions in the moment rather than the preconceived call and the way that you think the game will plan out. So combinations matter would be my key point to them as they move into this group. There's no doubt the squad has depth of quality and ability. Yes, we're without Furbank and Waibosi, Manu in the backs, and there's no Pepper or Sam Underhill in the forwards in what is already a ridiculously competitive back five anyway. So I think we've got all the tools. It's a case of can you get the tools in the right places at the right times and get them to gel and click in order to deliver. Yeah,
for sure. I strongly agree with what you just said there about being too data-led, by the way. I've felt that for a long time. Some person you mentioned there missing, Furbank. How big a loss is he for this England squad this tournament?
Well, I think, he's grown into that kind of running fullback role. And he's slightly different to Freddie Stewart, who's, as we know, is rock solid under the high ball. And Freddie Stewart's worked hard on his running game as well. So they're pushing one another, they're competing hard. But I think Furbank, he's got a natural eye for the gap. He's got good distribution and ball skills because he is capable of playing at 10 as well. So I think they'll miss his flexibility and his counter-attack threat. Where he adds real value, and the same with Waibosi. I mean, he's like a bouncing ball. He just appears everywhere. He's insanely powerful. as well as quick on his accelerations and a strong defender. So they're two big losses to the depth of the squad, not necessarily to the difference between winning and losing, but certainly to bring that competitiveness that you need in a Six Nations squad to bring the best out in everybody.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a bit of news today for the England squad is that Alex Mitchell is going to be fit to play. Your area of absolute specialty, Mike. Talk to me about Mitch?
Yeah, I mean, Mitchell he plays the game fast, right? I mean, the reality is, for me, it's all about how fast you are on the dance floor around that breakdown. Can you get in and out? And Mitch is currently the quickest and the best at getting in and out and keeping the ball moving, but also keeping the ruck defence around the ruck interested. He has a very good ability of getting himself square to keep the pillars tight, which means you can't leave him. Well, that means then that buys space for those outside him, whether they be forward runners or whether they be back runners. So I think Mitch is a big part of being able to play fast and quick if that is the way that England are going to play. And that's the $6 million question, because if you're not going to play that way, then don't pick him. You've got to pick someone like a Ben Spencer who tactically and his kicking game is probably the best as a 9 in the Premiership. And to manage a game, I think then it's all about the way that they're going to play. And I hope they're going to play fast and furious. Because I think we have the attacking threats to do that, both in the back five of our forwards, but also within our backs and the strike power, as well as the generals at 10 that can unlock. And then you've got some that can complement, whether that's Harry Randall to keep the same momentum in the game, or do you have someone like a Ben Spencer that will close a game off or bring a different kicking threat game. Paul Fleet again is in that kind of is that in-betweeny. And then you've got Rafi Quirk, who's been training with him, who is just he's a great athlete. He plays fast, he's deceptively quick, and moves the ball. But has he got the game management? I think that's the bit that he needs to develop and work on.
Yeah, well, with the initial 3 selections at scrum half of Mitchell, Randall and JVP, it does seem like England want to play fast. It does seem like they want to play quickly. So that was
I hope so.
Yeah.
Well, I hope so. But if they don't, then that comes back to the strategy piece, right? Rather, and picking the best combinations for the game plan you want to play, rather than the best players that are available to you. I mean, again, I think this squad is very much being picked more on form than the autumn squad, where I think a lot of people had some grace, which I think is a better thing to see.
Okay. Now then, the very big debate, which it always is in English rugby, the fly half position. What is your take on this, Geezer? What are you thinking?
Oh, I think it's this is not as clear cut as people think, and I knew we would talk about this, and I think it's a very interesting subject, because Marcus Smith is the man. Like, clearly right now, he's the man in possession. He kicks goals. He's got a great kicking game. His running game is fantastic. He plays what he sees, and he can unlock things from anywhere. But when you look at Finn Smith, like that, when that Northampton attack clicks, it's because it's a smooth running machine, because this boy is just putting people in holes. He is playing. He understands how Mitchell plays, and it's a joy to see. But if we're going to play that attacking fluid game, it's not to say that Mitch can't do that with Marcus as well. So I do think it's what's going to be outside him as well, because I think Marcus needs a big 12. He needs an Ollie Lawrence or a Oosterhuizen, who he had at Quins, to give him that. Whereas probably Finn doesn't necessarily need that. So it's a case of what that balance and that blend is. I liken it to the time. It's very different, but it's the same. When Mertens and Carlos Spencer were head to head the whole time, right? The difference between Carlos Spencer and Marcus Smith is that Carlos was a complete maverick. Marcus isn't a maverick in my mind. Like, he understands and plays the game plan very well. So I don't think Carlos Spencer could contain himself. He always had to do something. That was always kind of, and I love that about when you watched him play, you just knew there'd be something special. But you see that about Marcus. But I think Marcus is the man in possession, personally. But I think Finn brings potentially those around him more into the game. So does this provide a tactical nuance for England to use to their advantage, either at the start of games or in latter stages? And it will all depend on how they want to start and how they're going to play.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I've given this quite some thought as well. And I just think there's a piece here with it takes players a little bit of time, I think, to work out what Marcus is going to do, or give him the space to do all his magic and then play off that. And obviously, you see the Quins players, especially people like Alex Dombrand, who just link up with him so amazingly well, and we haven't really seen that with England. So I wonder whether it would almost be easier with the short amount of time they have in camp to get that with Finn Smith. And therefore, you should start with Finn Smith and have Marcus in reserve to come on when the game's a bit looser and do all his magic towards the end. Again, it's sort of tactical, really, in which way you use these guys.
Do you remember, though, the South Africa game? The first try in the autumn was a magic by Marcus Smith switching direction. That was within the first 5 minutes of the game. So,
Good point.
I'm not. I think this is the problem. Everybody's got an opinion, right? That's the beauty of rugby. I think ultimately they're both class rugby players, and they've got to find a way to get the best out of them and those around them. And if that means that they start one way round, and this is the true who starts and who finishes rather than who's starting and who's the bench. And there's so many different ways they could do it. They could start with Finn, bring Marcus on. They could start with Marcus, have Finn, and they could move Marcus to fullback, or they could start both of them. They've got, how fortunate are we that we've got 2 10s of this magnitude? And then let's not forget, you've also then got this third 10, George Ford, who's been there, seen it, done it, got the T-shirt, and, is just there to steady the ship as and when. I personally think the other two are ahead of him, but wow, what a man to have just there, just when you need him, just in case or whatever. I mean, phenomenal.
Yeah, and like I'm sure he'll be a coach throughout the week in the training camp and stuff like that as well. Okay, let's leave the 10 slot there. Now, what are you thinking in terms of wings, fullbacks, and the centres, Geezer? What do you think?
Yeah, so for me, I want us to play an attacking game, and I want us to be aggressive and play the holes and use the threats that we have. So for me, I would love to see Ollie Lawrence at 12, and I would love to see Tommy Freeman at 13. I think, and this is no disrespect to Slade, who has been a fabulous servant for England, but I just think there were holes defensively which the opposition will probably be looking at with him at 13. And is he more of a 12? I favour a larger 12, whether it's Finn at 10 or Marcus. That's why I kind of want to see Ollie there rather than a Dingwall, who I think is a great ball player. And I just think Tommy Freeman's a freak of an athlete that is effective on the wing, but has the skill sets to be just as effective at 13. And he finds gaps and holes, and he's a big man. And I think that combination could be interesting. And then on the wings, I would love to. I like Ollie Slightholme because I think he's different. He's direct. He's fast. He gives you go forward. He's great under the high ball. He chases everything. He's aggressive. He's physical. And then who would I like to see on the other wing? I'd love to see Caden Murley get a shot. I think he's been outstanding for Quins for the last 2.5 years. He understands. He chases high balls. With Wayo not being fit, it gives an opportunity. But I'd love to see a combination of those four. And then that, for me, because I would start Marcus at 10, I would probably go for a nice, solid Freddie at fullback, especially against Ireland, where it will be raining. High balls, I'm pretty sure Lowe will be pinging them up. I think they'll test us and try and put us under pressure, and he is decent under the high ball.
Yeah, and the rest of his game is really coming along as well now. You mentioned the running game there, but it's sort of handling and passing and putting other people into space has really, really come on as well this season. Yeah,
I mean he's been under the pump, and he either sulks or he evolves, and he's certainly done that. And when you listen to him talk, he cherishes every time he gets an opportunity. He had it young, and he's had it taken off him, and he wants it back, and he wants it back desperately. And credit to him. That's exactly what you want to see from young men who will die to represent their country. And credit to him. He wears his heart on his sleeve, and I like the way he goes about his business.
Yeah, me too. He seems like a really good lad. Now then, tactically, what do we think? How are England going to go about this? Let's just talk about the first game, I think, for the first time, because obviously Ireland away, if it's likely to be raining, there's a lot of factors there that need to be considered. How do you think we're going to go about that game?
Oh, I think the Borthwick way is to win the territory battle. And that kind of plays against why you start Mitchell. Why don't you start with a Ben Spencer who wasn't one of the original three? But I think if you've got to win the territory battle international rugby, and you've got to squeeze them. I think then we've got to use our running threats in transition or kick return as and when, which is why I like Slight Home, why I like Murley, and also the likes. You're going to get Freeman dropping back, a lot of threats that can run back, but also got decent boots. So I do think it will be attritional. We'll be set piece driven. I think the line out will be big, and the scrum. I think with Furlong being out, that's a bonus, because the Irish scrum is big. Our back five is big, depending on what he picks. But I think we were slightly going to be out muscled in the front row. And that kind of gives us a better chance with Furlong not there, which will be interesting, because the Irish machine is well oiled. So our D will need to be on point, and that's the thing that let us down in the autumn. We got unpicked too many times in that wide channel, in the 13 channel where we were flying in or not quite on the same page. So I think that's the challenge here, and hopefully we see a big improvement there. We can control possession, then we've got a shot, but we've got to control the skies.
Yeah, for sure. Now on that defence piece, so we're obviously trying to play a really uber aggressive defensive set in the last 12 months or so. Do you see them changing that now coming into this tournament? And obviously that initial line speed will pretty much always be there, but then if they do know they're outnumbered, do you see them then softening and jockeying and trying to get people to touchlines?
I don't know. I think ultimately, I think they want to play with line speed, as you said. But again, it was kind of all or nothing, kind of old school blitz. But they weren't together, and they weren't reading the fact that if the 13 did hinge in, everybody followed. So I think they will have to be a little bit more conservative in recognizing and realizing that. Where I think they need to up their aggression will be in the early carries. So if they can deny the carry and the post contact meters, then that will allow them to be on their feet, get their fold, and then get off the line and then suffocate. And I think that's ultimately the reality is dependent on what he picks in his pack. Does he go with a Chesham at 6 and almost kind of put some real meat in that back row to counter the Irish carrying threats, or does he try to just beat them to the breakdown? Tough to do.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Now then, let's flip this around. You're an opposition coach, Geezer. How are you targeting England? How do you think you can get at them and get the win?
I think Ireland will fancy the scrum. I do. I think they'll target the scrum, which will then allow them to get field position. And if they can get field position, we know they've got a strong line out. And what they do is they run really good continuity because of the Irish province's alignment. And I think aerially they'll try and test us. But if they can get fast ball, they'll look to exploit that kind of 12-13 channel and try and create that disconnect and flood numbers into that, with their blindside wingers and their fullbacks coming into those channels. So they'll want to get field position, and then they'll want front football, and then they'll play hard through you, and then they'll run their running shapes. I think that's what the way that Ireland will look. They'll go, if we impose our game plan, we will win because of their confidence and where they sit in the world and the way that they see things. And they are a well-oiled machine when they get going. So we've got to disorientate and stop the Irish continuity, which means slowing up their ball by hook, by crook, somehow slowing that ball, disrupting that ball. It'd be interesting if they pick at 10. I think that's the interesting thing. Will he pick Prendergast at 10, who's the man coming, this young protege star? It's a big game to pick him at. Big game.
That's kind of my opinion on it. I think it's a very good big game to pick him at, and I just think his ceiling might be higher than Crowley's, but I think Crowley for this week might be the right choice.
Yeah, and what he does, what does he do with his centre part pairing? And will it be Bundy? Will it be Bundy and Henshaw? Will it be Henshaw and Ringrose? What will it be?
Strong either way.
It is, but it's an interesting starting point. So, I still think, when you look at their back five, it's formidable, right? And I think their whole pack is a lot. So not having Furlong, they've still got Porter. Sheehan came back from 290 days with his ACL and knocked 2 tries over for Leinster and says, I'm ready for rock and roll. Well, let's hope he's not quite ready because he's a handful of a hooker. But they've got McCarthy. They've got O'Mahony. They've got Tad Byrne, who's outstanding. He's a great player, whether he plays in the second row or he plays at 6. You've got O'Mahony, you've got Doris, you've got Van der Fleer. I mean, it's a formidable back five. England are going to have to challenge and meet head on.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, then let's think about the tournament as a whole. How do you think England are going to go, and what would you deem as being successful in the tournament?
Do you know what? I think this is a really, again, I feel like I'm sitting on the fence a lot here, but international rugby now, especially with these teams that in the Six Nations, when you look at the teams, it's like we said, we ain't far away with the depth, and it's about time. And what does success look like for this group? Ultimately, you're judged by your win and losses, but if you're slightly off, you're nearly there, but not quite there, you get battered. France, when you look at the France squad, it's ridiculous. And they are looking good, but they've got to go, they've got to come to Twickenham, which is always tough for them. But, we've got Scotland at Twickenham. Scotland tend to do quite well at Twickenham the last couple of days, the last couple of years, if I think rightly. We've got to go to Ireland. Tough place. We've got to go Wales. Now, in theory, you would say that was a gimme with the problems they've got. But you never know with where, they're a wounded animal. Gatland's back's against the wall. So, and then Italy, who are unknown, but they're at home. We should beat Italy. So I think if we can win all our home games, I think that would be success. And if we can nick one away, that would be wonderful. So I think 4 from 5 would be amazing. I think we're more likely to win 3. I'm not sure which 3, but I think we'll definitely beat Italy, and I think we should beat Wales. And we're capable of winning both of those home games against France and Scotland. But we've got to be on the money. We can't afford to be there or thereabouts, or we're not far away, because you won't beat those teams because they're that good at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. It is a very tough tournament to call, I think. And as always with this tournament, like early results and getting that momentum is such a key factor.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You might know. Do Ireland play France where?
I can't remember.
Yeah, because I think that's the defining. That's the defining game. I mean, when I look at
Ireland, actually, it's in Ireland.
Yeah, so I think advantage is with Ireland on this Six Nations. But when you look at that French squad, not just the starting 15, the mob that they can call on, it's special. Although I did hear that Penno might be injured, who's just been on ridiculous form for them. But anyway.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, brilliant. Let's bring this to a close. So people at home, that's what we think. But what do you think? Are there any key players that we missed that didn't talk about that you think will play a key role? Any factors that we didn't say that you think will have a big influence on this England team during this Six Nations? Let us know in the comments down below and we'll join you there for a conversation. Give the video a thumbs up if you don't mind while you're down there. Helps other people find it. And it leaves me to say, Geezer, thank you so much for your time today. That was another great chat.
Cheers, pal. All good.
Lovely. And people at home, you can subscribe there. You can watch that one next. And don't forget to get out and play.